Well, good evening and welcome once again to the LBJ Grasslands outside of Decatur, Texas. Tonight's exercise is the first in a two-part field evaluation of the Nitecore P35i, which I have next to the P23i, just for a quick relative size comparison. Now, I want to thank Nitecore for sending me this light and making the review possible. I have reviewed LEP lights in the past. I've discussed how they work, how I use them in search and rescue, so I'm not going to revisit any of that to make the video more tractable. I'm also not going to revisit all the features of the light. I believe viewers are fundamentally smart. You've been to the website, you've looked over the feature list, you're already familiar with that. What you really want to see is beam shots, and we will get there very quickly. I want to just very briefly go over a few observations that I've had from actual hands-on experience with the light. When I first took it out of the box, you'll notice that this, at a glance, looks very similar to the control setup for the P23i. So I was somewhat under the impression that this had complete tail cap operation. That is not correct. This is in fact the rubber cover for the USB-C charging port. Now, you might think, well, why would any manufacturer put a charging port right here? Well, as it happens, Nitecore offers a pressure switch that works with this light. It comes in the box and it plugs in to that area, and then it latches onto this indentation for a tight fit. Now, I'm going to have to do a separate review of pressure switch operation because that switch actually gave me some interesting ideas on how I might use this light as a left shoulder mounted long throw light. But what I wanted to point out in terms of this rubber cap is that there's an extension right here that fits down into the USB-C slot, and your natural inclination is just to fold it over like this. That doesn't fit. You actually have to push it back in. And the point I want to make is, since this on-off momentary is completely exposed, it doesn't take much pressure to trigger the momentary. So if you're fumbling with this cover, your fingers are right around that. So it does take a little bit of getting used to, and of course, always be aware of where that light is pointing. But it will take just a little bit. See, I've already pushed it back in, and so I can smooth it over here, and there's a good fit. So it took me about 2 or 3 tries to get that. Now, you can see the OLED indicator here, probably the #1 feature of the light. This is your output level switch. Now notice that's not very raised. I can find it with my fingers okay, but I tend to prefer these, especially in gloved operations, to be raised more. So what I've done is I've taken one of my extra clips and I put it in line with that switch. Now, on the subject of output, there are 3 output modes with different levels per output mode. There is spot, which is your LEP, flood, and then mix, both of which should be self-explanatory. The spot and flood have Nitecore's typical 5 levels. They call them ultra low, low, mid, high, turbo. The mix has 3 output levels: low, medium, high. But I know what the score is. You're not interested in hearing me talk anymore. Actually, I'm not interested in hearing me talk anymore. You want to see beam shots. All right, you want it, you got it. So if the light is off, a quick click of the output level switch gives you the mode that you're in and the output level, which in this case is flood and level 1. There are 5 output levels in this particular mode. Now, we are looking out into an open area at this campground, about 29, not quite 30 yards line of sight to that far tree line, and I'm illuminating this area in 1000 lumen flood with my headlamp. So let me get that off. And if we bring this back around, you can see we are in level 1 flood on the Nitecore. Let me bump that up. Level 2. Then 3. 4. 5 or turbo. And for me, this is a very impressive output because it means, in addition to a long throw, and I do mean long throw light, I have an incredibly useful flood for doing closer quarters area searches, and I will show you an example of that later on. Now let me see if I can do this with my opposite hand. Get my headlamp back on so that you can see when you switch. See, there is the output level indication. All right, now let's go look at what you really wanted to see, which is the spot or LEP. I have shifted position. We are now looking out across a road to a far tree line that has a maximum of about 120 yards line of sight from my current position. I'm lighting this up with the P35i on high mode. I'm going to switch out with the P35i. That is in level 1, or the lowest output mode. Let me kick that up. There's level 3. And for spot identification, the illumination inside that tree line is pretty insane. There's 4. And 5. All right, next we'll look at mix mode. All right, same location, level 1 mix. You can definitely see some spill. Up 1, there's level 2. And then finally, level 3. So I suppose useful for the situation where you're doing a very targeted identification, but you, in one platform, still want to have some good peripheral illumination. All right, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to head down towards CottonWood Lake, and when I get there, we'll do some more tests. So I'm at roughly the northeast corner of Cottonwood Lake, looking back diagonally. From this position, I've got over 700 yards line of sight, and I have my headlamp on 2000 lumen spot, and it's just getting swallowed up by the darkness. So I'm going to swap some lights out here, do this with one hand. Okay, that is level 5 spot or turbo. Oh, you see the bird going across there? I have, even with the unaided eye, magnificent visibility to the opposite shoreline, and there's a little cove right there, and then you see some trees blocking, and that cove continues to go back off to my left until you get to the maximum extent of the lake, which is about 800 yards. With a magnified optic, yeah, I could do identifications to that opposite edge very easily, which answers a critical question for me, because I never deploy an LEP light by itself. I always have a couple other pieces of kit. You know, let's say we were searching for a lost kayaker out here. Well, I wouldn't search like this. This is incredibly inefficient. I would use thermal night vision to do a quick scan and make a detection. And then the nice thing about this Nitecore is I've got 5 different levels of spot, which allow me to tailor the illumination to the specific distance I'm working at. Then I would have a magnified optic. I typically use a Vortex Optics Solo RT, and use that to turn detection into identification. So this is just absolutely impressive, and it gives you a rough idea of one of the ways I would use an LEP light in search and rescue. Now what I want to do is go back and do an area search test and show you some more of that flood. So here's a completely different scenario. I thought I was getting kitted out to do some very long range, very wide area searches, and then just as I headed out, I got a change of orders. I'm now searching for a couple of lost kids. We're afraid that they headed down the road, got disoriented, might have gone off and played in some of these camping areas. So now I have to do a closer quarters area search. So I've got my headlamp in 400 lumen flood, and I've got the P35i on level 3 flood. And I'm just going to see kind of how these two work together, because what I'm really doing now is I'm just looking all over this area for sign. Okay, are there any footprints in this area? Could they have gone down by the edge of the lake? Okay, here's an area over here. So I would search very carefully in a pattern around this area to see if they went back in here. So I don't need to necessarily light this up with, you know, many hundreds of thousands of candela, and I don't want to blow all the illumination in my headlamp, because I may need to stay out literally all night. This is a small pond, and so I can do a quick scan across that. Let's bump up. Now we're in level 4. So normally I would carry a closer quarters flood with me in my pack to use for this. What I'm seeing is that in these situations, the P35i offers me the best of both the long throw and short throw worlds. Okay, there's level 5 or turbo, and I'm getting great visibility across this small pond. Then I can continue walking my pattern across here. So that just gives you another idea of how I might use this light in search and rescue. Okay, I want to do one more demonstration for you, and it's a follow-up to my last example. So let's say I'm doing one of my area searches. I'm in the exact same situation that I started out in the last segment, 400 lumen flood on the headlamp, level 3 flood on the P35i, and I'm walking my search pattern out here. Then all of a sudden, there's a very dark and somewhat depressed area to my left. Let's say I look over there and I hear something, or I detect some flaming red eye shine, and I hear a growl or something, and I really want to get some serious light downrange. I can tell here, we're probably looking at a couple football fields line of sight. There's no way I can see well down in there. Okay, well, it would be a real hassle to stop what I'm doing, put the light into the spot mode, and then run it up to turbo. Well, if I press and hold the output level button, we get immediate to turbo, and I can get the exact situational awareness that I need. Just let go, and I can run turbo as long as I need to, and then quick click returns me back to my original lighting mode. So I've got a couple of options there for one step to turbo, and then either holding it or going back. And if I were to do that again and not do any changes whatsoever for 30 seconds, the light would automatically revert to its previous output level. All right, well, let's head back to the truck, and I'll do a quick summary. All right, we're back at the truck. I did about 12 minutes of off-camera testing, mostly in that mix medium mode. So yeah, we still got plenty of battery. Let's turn it on. That's where we were in that level 3 flood, the run time at that level. Let's go up. There's level 4 flood and our anticipated runtime after quite a bit of usage. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, yeah, there's level 5. So I've got, a good 21 minutes estimated left at this level. So in addition to that OLED readout, I think the flood and spot were the big wins. Having that optional flood only, I think is great, because in a 6-8 hour session, I probably would not use an ultra long throw light that much. The mix, I think the verdict is still out. I'm going to test that more extensively in the next review, where I'm also going to cover pressure switch activation Just in terms of maybe a couple of other things I would have liked to have had some sort of tripod setup where I could quickly screw this into a tripod, because when I'm running an ultra long throw station, I like to have my light and magnified optic completely stabilized. I think the verdict is still out about that cover. I'm just going to have to see how pressure switch operation goes. I probably would like to see a very simple electronic lockout and perhaps a better raised output level switch. But overall, you know, I think the light has a lot going for it, and we're going to see, I think, in detail what this thing is capable of in the second part of the field evaluation. I'm going to get very deep into the grasslands and simulate a couple of difficult searches that I've had to do in the past. But until we hit that review, as always, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for watching the video.